If you have clicked on this video, I bet you love challenging your mind because this game is probably the most complicated game in the entire world to play. It's relatively easy to learn, but winning at it is really difficult. I invite you to learn how to play one of the most complex games in the world, chess. Disclaimer, disclaimer. This video is for the absolute beginners, the ones who want to learn this beautiful game. So if you are one of them, let's start. So this 8 cross 8 board is what a typical chess board looks like. And as for the letters that you can see here, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and 1, 2, 3, 4, we'll talk about them later. First, I want you to observe that there are two sides to the game. So a chess is a two-player game played with the black and the white pieces. And this is how the rules will be typically laid down for any game. I'll tell you how you have to play the game, how the turns go around, and finally, how do you end a game. So, the victory and losing conditions for a game. So, currently, you can see that these things that these signs that that you see on the board are pieces. So you have basically 16 different pieces on each side. So as a white player, you will have 16 pieces. As a black player, they'll have 16 pieces. Now, I want you to know the names of these different pieces. So identical looking pieces have the same names. So the ones that I'm covering in red are called pawns. We'll discuss about every single piece further in the video, but right now you can know that these are the pawns. The these two, the ones on the extreme ends of the board, are called rooks. Now, the ones next to them, they are pretty evident in their shape. They are called knights. The ones next to them are called bishops. Then this little piece is called the queen. So these two are the queens in the board. And finally, the last piece is the king. And needless to say, the king is the most important in the game. And we'll see how every piece moves, and what do you have to do in the game finally. Okay, so first things first, how the game goes around. So the game starts with the white piece. Always and always, whoever is white makes the first move. So this is how the game goes. You make a move, the opponent makes a move, then you make a move, then the opponent makes a move, then you make a move. So it's a turn by turn game, and what you have to do is you have to move your pieces. Now, how will you move your pieces on the board is something we'll learn further. First things first, we'll start with the pawns. So you can see that there are two pawns on the board right now. There is a white pawn and there is a black pawn. And how each piece moves is that whenever, okay, so you have a direction defined, right? So let's say that I was white and I was playing through this line. So this line is the one close to me and this is the one farther away from me. So my pawns will always move towards the farther line. And how do they move? They can move only in this direction. You can take it and make it move one square ahead. And once you have done that, your move is gone. It's the opponent's move now. So the opponent can take it and move it one square ahead. Then I can take it, move it one square ahead. Then they can take it, move it one square ahead. So pawns typically move only in one step difference. There are other rules to it as well, but they mostly move in one step difference. However, there are some things called as capturing in chess. So when you capture a piece, what you essentially do is you go and sit on where the opponent's piece was, and the opponent piece is off the board. It is no longer in play. Mostly pieces capture in a different way than pawns. So, for example, if it was a rook, what you could have done is taken your rook, and however the rook moves, you move the rook to the square on which the opponent piece is, and you sit there. But for a pawn normally moves in vertical. But whenever, okay, so let's say that my pawn was here and it is white's move right now. So one option might have been to go one square ahead, but while capturing, you capture with a pawn diagonally. So what you do is you just go and sit on this square. And as you can see, the opponent's piece is off the board. It is no longer in play. However, you can't really capture a piece, another piece with a pawn in front of it. So if such a situation occurs, you can simply not move your pawn. A pawn can only capture the diagonal squares to it, diagonal squares, and even in front of it. No pawn can go behind or back or anything like that. So these are the rules for the pawns. A, pawn moves forward. B, pawn captures diagonally in the forward direction. C, pawn moves one square at a time. So next up is the rook. The rook is a very important piece in the board, and it's relatively simple to move. So, as you learned that a pawn moves one square forward, a rook can move any number of squares forward. So, as long as the file is open, we'll learn what a file is, what openness is, and more. But currently, we can see that there is no other piece on the file, right? So, a rook can move any number of squares along a horizontal or along a vertical direction. A rook can't really go along the diagonal direction, neither can it capture in the diagonal direction. So if it wants to capture, let's say this pawn, I can move it in the vertical direction in place of this pawn, and then this pawn will be out of the board. I could have as well been here, still captured this pawn with like a rook with this move. So a rook can move. Here are the rules for the rook. A rook can move any number of squares in either the vertical or the horizontal direction. So the next one is the bishop. Well, essentially there are two bishops in the starting on one side of the board. Now there are also two rooks in starting in one side of the board, but it was not really important to tell the difference between two rooks, but two bishops are a little different than each other. So first I'll tell how a bishop moves. So a bishop on its square can only move along the diagonals. So and again it can move any number of diagonals. It is like a rook in some sense because a rook can also move any number of tiles in the vertical or the horizontal direction, but a bishop can move any number of tiles in any diagonal direction. One thing I might have forgotten about the rook is that a rook can also move backwards. It's fine. It can move forward, it can move right. Sorry, yeah, it can go forward, it can go right, it can go left, and it can go back in any number of tiles. Similarly, a bishop can go left diagonal, right diagonal, left back, right back, any number of tiles there are present on the board. So that is how a bishop moves. And if you have noticed, then you can really say that a bishop that is on a square, white square, can only ever be on a white square because the diagonal to a white square is always a white square. It can go here, then it can go here, and it will still be a white square. You can come back, it's still a white square. You can come here, it's still a white square. Similarly, a bishop on the black square can only always be on a black square. Now, uh, I'm sorry if you think I'm colorblind and I'm saying that this is a black square. Black, it's green. I get it. But essentially, in the classical chess boards, these were black and white squares. So that's where I have got this name from. And mostly, I mean, the common chess board looks a little black and white. But yeah, what we call them are dark colored squares. So yes, a dark colored bishop can so a dark colored square bishop can only move on dark colored squares. So black bishop will only move on the black tiles. So and again any number of tiles and whenever you place your bishop on that square, then that piece goes away and you are there and you have captured the piece and it is off the board. So next up is the queen. The queen is probably the most important piece on the board. Not the most important, the most powerful piece on the board. So what a queen has, the queen has abilities of both a rook and a bishop at the same time. So what it does is that it can move forward like a rook in vertical directions. It can also move in diagonals like a bishop in all directions. So queen is both a bishop and a rook combined in a single piece. And again, it can move in multiple directions. And so a movement like this is possible, a movement like this is possible, a movement like this is possible. And again, whenever you have to capture an opponent's piece, you can simply go till that square and the opponent's piece is no longer there. It is off the board. So I guess you have pretty much got a hang of capturing by now and a hang of also moving pieces like the rook, the bishop, the queen, and the pawn. We have two more pieces left, the knight and the king. Next important piece is the knight. Uh, okay, so a knight moves very differently than what you might see in a rook or a bishop game. Well, rooks and bishops move linearly, that is, in a single direction whenever they start making a move. So if it moves in vertical, horizontal, whatever direction, it simply goes along that direction, right? But if I ask you how a knight moves, if I don't show you how it moves, then you might be surprised. I'll say in one move the knight is here, and when I make the next move, it's here. When I make the next move, it's here. When I make the next move, it's here. You might start noticing a pattern, but I'll just tell you the pattern what it is. So it is this: a knight can go in a single move. A knight goes two blocks to one direction and then a single block to the other direction. So it is like this. So let's say that I wanted to go two blocks down and one block right. That is a valid move of the knight. Two blocks down, one block right, left. That's a valid move of the knight. So knight always moves in what we classically call 2.5 squares. So 2.5 squares means two blocks in one direction and one block in the other direction. And it can also happen vertically, horizontally, and horizontally, vertically. So this and this is fair, and this is also fair. And how do we represent that is by this. Sorry, by this. So you can see that these arrows are for typical knight moves, 2.5 moves. So what I was showing you earlier was this only. So let's say the knight is here, I can go here. Then the knight is here, I can go here. The knight is here, I can go here. So a knight in a central position can have eight possible squares to go to. Let's count together these eight possible squares. So vertical up and one horizontal, vertical up and one horizontal, first horizontal, then vertical up, first horizontal, then vertical down, first horizontal, then vertical up, first horizontal, then vertical down, and horizontal, vertical down, and horizontal. So these are the eight squares that a central knight can move to. If let's say the knight is here, then these out of the bound squares are just not there, and only a few squares are left to move to. So yeah, that was it about knight. And again, I'm sure you have got a hang of capturing. If a knight is here and if it's right to move, then I can go on the square on which the opponent piece is and I can capture it. So it's the last piece that I'm going to introduce to you, and the name is the king. You might expect the king to be all powerful and move to every square of the board and take away all the pieces and have special abilities, but it really does not. The king moves in rather simple fashion. The king says that okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 adjacent squares. I'll move to one of them, and that's all I will do. So king in a single move can go to these 8 squares, and that is it. A king does not have a multi-dimensional moving ability that okay, it can go 3 squares at a time or something. Only a rook, bishop, and a queen, and partially a knight can do that. A king moves in single steps like pawns, but unlike pawns, it can move in multiple directions. So that's about king. But here's the fun part about king. If the king is not present on the board, the game does not go on. You don't play without the king. That's the importance of it. So let's now come back to our original setup of the board. So this is how the game looks like before it starts, right? Now there are a few things that may not be known to you that I want to tell. Firstly, it is that pieces like rooks and bishops and queens and kings, these are locked. So, for example, I, I I did tell you that a rook can move any number of squares in a vertical direction, but if there is my piece or even the opponent's piece, I can't cross this piece and move in the opposite direction. So I can see that there is a pawn here. So the rook can't really cross it. The bishop can't really cross and come to this square simply because my pawn is there. If the opponent's pawn was there, let's say, even then, I couldn't cross it, but rather I could have captured it. Capturing it is the maximum amount of distance that I could have covered in that direction. So, yeah, there is that. But for the knight, a knight can jump over. That's the special ability of a knight. I realized that I had learned it intuitively, but I never really paid attention to this special ability of knight that can jump over things, although I've used it quite frequently in games. So yes, that's the ability of a knight. It can jump over and come to this square. A knight has no problem doing that. But again, the queen can't really come out of this before these pawns are create a gap for my queen to come out. Same for the king. The king even doesn't move multiple tiles at one time, so that's pointless to say. But yeah, that was it about every single piece other than the knight. Oh, even the pawns. Even the pawns. If there is my own pawn here, then I can't really go ahead unless that pawn goes ahead. Okay, so before I tell you how the game ends, let's at least start playing a little. Um, so yeah, I'll just show you how consecutive, step over move looks like. So this is how it goes. I make a move, they make a move. So pawns are valid moves, right? There is nothing ahead of it, and I can move pawn vertically single step wise. Then I make a move, then they make a move. Again, these are valid moves. Then I bring my bishop out. So if you remember, bishops move diagonally. That is fair. And they might bring the knight out. So the rule that we learned that knights can jump over things. That's how I always want you to imagine a knight. Remember, I not remember, but you can imagine, right, that horses can jump over obstacles. So a horse rider is a knight, so knight can jump over the opponent or even their own pieces. Then you can make another move, they can make another move. You can see that pawn moves are vertical in a single step, and again, a knight just came here, jumped over my own king, and so this is how the game looks like. White makes a move, black makes a move, and that's pretty much half rules of the game. We'll learn the next half. As with all games, we need to learn how to win them. Well, winning a chess game is simply capturing the opponent's king. That's all that that's the one line definition of it. You need to capture your opponent's king. So for example, if it is your move right now, I can place the queen on this square and the king will be gone. But that's not the ideal way of doing it, right? Remember, I mean, imagine any battle and you have surrounded the opponent main lead with all your troops. Do you really kill him or do you make him surrender? You make him surrender. So that's what you do in chess as well. What you do is you make the situation such that in a single move, the opponent king or the opponent pieces can't really do anything at all to prevent the king from being captured in the very next move. So, for example, in this situation, if it's black to move right now, then no matter which square I go to, you can see that these 8 possible squares are there and a single possible move for the pawn is here. No matter which square I go to, I'll capture the king in the very next position, right? So this is something, this particular situation has a name, and the name is check and mate. We'll learn what a check is, but what a mate particularly is that when the opponent can do nothing but be captured in the very next move. So that is when the game ends. When you can get your opponent in such a position where he is helpless and he has to get his king captured in the very next move. Of course, the game can end in the other way as well. If your king gets in such a situation and then the opponent wins and you are mated, There is a third situation as well. That's called a draw, and we'll learn about that too. So one part of the check and mate is the check. So what essentially a check is a threat. So okay, let's look at this situation right now. It's white to move right now, and you can see that white can make a number of moves. But if it decides to make this particular move or this particular move with the queen, so let's say I came to this square, and now I have threatened black. I have threatened that if you don't save yourselves, if you don't move away this king, then I'll capture the king in the next move. So this threat is what we call a check. And a threat is not simply something that you can take advantage of. It's not, you can't take advantage of the carelessness when you announce the threat. You say it out loud, you say check, and your opponent can't, like, let's say I was black, I can't really make this move. This is an invalid or an illegal move in chess terms. So as opponents, you always have to save yourself. And even if I make this move, you will call me out as the white player and you will say, brother, you are doing a mistake. I'll capture your king. Don't. So you'll take this piece back and you will rather move your king away. And if you can't move your king away, then that's a check and mate situation, right? Moving your king away or saving yourself from the check or even capturing my queen, all those are valid moves. So yeah, that's what the check is, a threat. So the idea of check really enforces a lot of things on the board now. So look at this board, and let's say it's right to move, and I decide to make this move, rook to this square. I'll tell you what this means, but for now, let's say that rook comes to this square which I have highlighted with the red, and you as black really see an opportunity. You see, okay, my bishop is here, and I know that bishop moves in diagonals, and there's the opponent's queen there, and I can actually go there and capture the opponent's queen. How brilliant is that? The queen is so powerful. The queen was moving everywhere, and opponent will have no queen now, and I'll be winning and everything. But what you tend to forget is that if this bishop moves here, then this rook moves along this line and captures the king. Again, capturing the king is not possible in chess. You only threaten the king to surrender. That's all you do. So, what that essentially means is that you can never move this bishop now unless you move this king away. So, yeah, even though you are desperate to capture the queen, you can't. Sorry for its pawn movement, it doesn't really happen like that. You want to capture the queen, but it doesn't happen like that. All you can do is move your king away first and then capture the queen. Until then, white would have moved away. But yeah, this situation occurs a lot in chess, and this is called a pin. So what a pin means is that simply because you can't move this piece because there is a more valuable piece behind it, and the valuable piece and the original piece are both being attacked by the opponent. So I get it. It's a confusing game. You have learned about six different pieces, different kinds of move they make, how to win a game, kings and their abilities, and queens and their abilities, and captures and checks and mating and pins. There are a lot of things that you have learned. I want you to try out a game first, and if you're really sure about you are remembering the rules, then there are some more rules for you. There are special rules in chess that apply in one or two single uh, kind of situations, but they are even important to know because I mean you might be playing a game and your opponent uses such rules, and you would argue you're cheating. He's not. You don't know the rules. So learn the rules first. So yeah, let's start with the special rules of the first pawn moves. So what they mean is that, okay, remember when I told you that pawns move vertically in single steps? Well, in chess, there is a rule that says that when the pawn is on the initial square, so you can see that the pawn starts from this file for white and this file for black. So whenever they are on these squares, when they have not made a single move, then in the first place they can move to two squares. So they can jump over a square, not ideally jump over, but yeah, this is what they can do. They can directly go to the square and no one leaves them anything. So yeah, that's what pawns do. And it doesn't really even matter if it's my own first move. So, for example, I can make this move. This is valid. The opponent can make this move. This is also valid. And this move is also valid. So, for every pawn, their first move. So, yeah, I mean, I can move this, and then the entirety of the game can go along. I can capture bishops and do whatnot. And even in the end, if this pawn is here, in the very last of the game, even if this pawn exists here, then I can make this move. There is no one stopping me from doing this. So yeah, that was the first tool, first special tool that initially the pawn gets a booster advantage. It has the choice of moving either to the first square or to the second square. From here on, the pawns can't move two squares. From here on, the pawn can only move a single square and capture in the diagonals of it. So the next big special rule is called castling. Um, okay, I'll just show you directly what castling is. How many moves do you think I made? You might argue that this is not possible. First, the king would have to go there, then the king would have to go there. I mean, what have I done? I mean, the king is suddenly here, the rook is here, and black did not even get a chance to make any move. It's still valid. So what castling essentially does is that it exchanges position of king and rook in this opposite direction, but not directly exchanging the king to the rook square or the rook to the king square, but rather sending the king to the other side of the rook and the rook to the other side of the king. So this is one single move, and this is valid. Castling has many more rules, I mean, many conditions imposed upon it, such as the king should not have moved previously, or the rook should not have moved previously, and there are two kinds of castle, the castle of this king with this rook, but there is also one more rook here, so there is a different kind of castle here. This one is called a short castle, this one is called a long castle, and there are a lot of things regarding that. I would suggest you to if you want to watch more about castling, you should research on the internet. There is a video on our channel as well that explains castling. But yeah, this was another special move that I urge you to look upon. Well, do you believe in rebirth? Because what I'm going to show you is rebirth in chess. So, I mean, while I was telling you that pawns move forward and never backward, and pawn is the only piece that does so, you might come up with a question. You might say, okay, that's fair. So yeah, let's play this. Let's say I move this pawn to here. It's black to move now. I go back. Then this pawn here. It's black to move now. I come back. I go back, and I mean you can see what is happening, right? You can eventually see that the pawn will come to this square, and then it's useless. There is no diagonal or front ahead of it. So why, like, what happens then? Well, in chess, there is a concept of a rebirth at this position. So a pawn, whenever it reaches the opponent's last file, any pawn, it doesn't matter which pawn, but any pawn that reaches the opponent's last file can be promoted into any piece it wants to be. So this weakest piece, so-called, can actually be now any piece. Might it be the rook, the bishop, the queen, the knight? It doesn't really care. Well, the next special rule is a little very specific to one particular rule, and that is called the En-Passant. So, to discuss this, we'll actually need to go to the origins of why this particular move was required. So, let's see the board right now. Well, you can see that on the board, my white pawn is in the fifth row. By now, if you have not really recognized, then these numbers are the number of the rows. We'll come to these number letter combination in future, but right now you can understand that the white pawn, which started from this square, is now at this square, on the fifth square from the right side, whereas the black pawn is on this square, and it if it is black to move now, it can maybe move to this square or this square. So it is this particular combination that produces the move of en-passant. Well, let's see the board a little more clearly now and realize that black has the opportunity to do both of these. But it will be unfair for white if black jumps over this square because no pawn really jumps over a square while moving, right? So in situations like these, this and this only, when the opponent pawn decides to cross me in one single move, it is then I can make this move. When I can actually capture this pawn, when I can go to the square of like what I'll do is I'll assume that this pawn was not on this square but rather on this square. So although I've moved it here, I can assume that it is here and then take this pawn. This thing entirely works. But there are a few conditions to it. So for example, let's say black moved this. It is not really possible that I can move this king first, then he moves his knight first, and then I do the en-passant. So en-passant has some basic rules that you have to take the pawn in the next immediate move. And it happens only in this particular row combination that I'm standing at the fifth row and adjacent to my column is some pawn that has decided to make the special two move. So it happens when you do the special move, the en passant is a special move following that special move. So that's why it's very niche and specific, but it's very satisfactory to use it simply because of the rarity of it. So now let's come to the thing that we were looking forward to, the letters and the numbers shown here. So you can see, the classical name for it is actually notations, and there are notations for each square and notations for moves. So if you understand notations for squares, you will definitely get what do I mean when I say B cross C3 or maybe King C2, K C2, Queen C2, and all that stuff. So it's a typical Cartesian coordinate system, if you understand that. So what happens is, okay, imagine it like this. There is an x-axis and a y-axis, and I'm plotting points on my graph with correspondence to the x-axis and the y-axis. And rather than doing it in terms of two numbers, I'm doing it in a combination of a letter and a number. So my rows are represented by the numbers on the left, and my columns are represented by the letters on the bottom row. So, for example, let's say you wanted to know what is the letter for this square. So you can see that it corresponds to the letter E and it corresponds to the row 4. So the name for that is E4. Uh, is that pretty simple to understand? If you think you have cracked that, I want you to try the next square, the square that I have labeled here. What do you think the name for that should be? It's easy, right? It's D5. Just one last exercise to know that you have done it surely. This square on the very corner of the board. The name? Exactly. It's H8. So that's how simple it is to understand. There are more move notations to it. I won't dive deep into the aspects of it, but I'll just like to show you this. Whenever you move a piece to that square, you just say the first letter of that piece and then the name of that square. So you say bishop e4, b e4, or king d5, k d5, or queen h8, q h8. Just for pawns, because pawns are so common, you don't really write p something, you just write e4. So whenever someone says just e4, it is understood that you want a pawn to go to there. And whenever you are capturing a piece, it in the middle of the name of the piece and the square there is a cross, so it goes like b cross c5 or b cross b3 or something like that. So but yeah, these were notations, but the importance of notations is this: whenever you are play in a tournament or some anywhere official, you want your match to be recorded because cases of default might occur. So I mean, my opponent might just argue, okay, he didn't do that. So you keep writing down your own moves, you keep writing down your game. It's a historical record, and many a times you want to analyze your game by looking at your own moves. So that's how you can't really remember the entire game. So you write it down move by move, and that's how you can recreate an entire game out of just pen and paper. Well, let's come to the famous question. Is chess solved? Before coming to chess itself, it's a really complicated game. I would rather come to something simpler. Let's look at a tic-tac-toe game. I'm sure you all must know what a tic-tac-toe is, but just for a reminder, all you have to do is you have to form line of three consecutive crosses or circles. So that's I don't know if it's called dot and cross or something in your language. So this is a tic-tac-toe game. And you can see that currently I have how many? If I'm playing as square, then I have one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 total squares that I can make the first move in. And the moment I make the first move, the opponent has 8 total squares. Then I have 7 total squares, then opponent has 6 total squares, then I have 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So even if the game went till the end, how many total possibilities of game do you think exist? Well, they are 9 factorial. So the factorial of a number is basically the number multiplied by every single number previous to it until you hit 1. And so this is what 9 factorial is, and that is the total number of possibilities in which a game of tic-tac-toe could go till the end. Sure, it might end in between and everything, but this is just to simplify the calculation. And you might argue that this is a big number, which I might agree to, but it is just this much. 3,62,880. I mean, sure, there are symmetry arguments that okay, games will repeat on and stuff like that. But if you see in the totality of it, a tic-tac-toe game, there is just at a max, like this is even a higher number, there will be definitely less than this, but at a max, just 3,62,000 games can be played uniquely. But what about chess? Can we even calculate that number? Let's try doing that. So the similar way we did for a tic-tac-toe game, we realized that there were 9 possibilities in that game. What about chess? How many moves do you think White has in his domain right now when the game has not even started? Um, Take some time, try to take a guess or even calculate. It's fairly simple to calculate it right now. So here's the answer. If your guess was 20, you are correct. Why? Because there are 8 different pawns that can move first, and they can move to 2 different levels. So it might go till the third row or it might go till the fourth row. So there are 8 into 2, 16 moves, and then there were 2 knights, and these 2 knights can go to 2 different squares each. So that accounts to 4 more moves and a total of 20. So white in its initial position can move 20 different moves. So can black. Black has no restriction in moving 20 different kinds of move at the first place. But what happens after that? After that, it really depends on which move you have made. So let's say that you had moved the bishop first. Sorry, you had moved the pawn in front of the bishop or in front of the king first. At that moment, let's say I have moved this, then I have increased the possibility of this one move, two moves, three moves, four move, five move. I mean, there are n number of moves that might even go along the way. You can Google how many chess games are possible after the first 4, 5 moves, and it will give you a number, and that number will be huge, really huge. So a game like this is not solved by exploring all possibilities in the beginning itself. Rather, when you hear of chess engines solving chess, it is more like an engine knows which position is better to play in. An engine has not yet calculated the entire possibility of a game just from the starting. What it does is whenever you make a move, you reduce the number of permutations in the totality of it. So then it decides, okay, now the board looks like this. What should I move to make the board look even better? So it plays on the betterness of every position, but rather what we saw in tic-tac-toe, 3,62,000 games is not at all difficult for a computer to solve. In fact, you could even Google it upon that if you make the first move in tic-tac, it's impossible for you to lose if you play correctly. The opponent could either at maximum draw or and you can even win the game but never lose. So yeah, that is about it. This was just to tell you that there is still, I mean, it's fun to play chess as a human. You don't really need to calculate the entirety of the board, but rather analyze the board every time. Analyze which move would look good on the board. There are principles of chess, there are openings, there are endgame theories, there are middle game strategies that you could learn upon and improve your game. It's a really beautiful game, a really complex game also, but it's very fun to play. So that was it about today, guys. If you really enjoyed learning chess, I would encourage you to play more games. That's what learning a game is about, right? You don't really want to learn the rules for not playing. Go out, make an account on chess.com or Lichess or anywhere. Ask your friend or siblings to play with you and have fun playing with it. And if you want to learn more about chess, do subscribe to our channel. And if you want to watch anything in particular regarding chess, drop down a comment and we'll make a video on it. Thank you.